I'm Madison, 34 years old, and I never thought my anniversary party would become a nightmare. My husband Jason stood there, champagne glass raised, announcing to our friends and family that I was pregnant. The room erupted in cheers while I froze in confusion. I wasn't pregnant. I never was. Later that night, I found messages between him and his mistress. Call me once it's done. The pregnancy was hers, not mine. He humiliated me publicly to cover his affair. 3 weeks later, I taught him a lesson he never saw coming. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to see how I turn this humiliation into the ultimate lesson. From the outside, my life with Jason seemed perfect. We had been married for 8 years, living in a beautiful 2-story colonial in an upscale neighborhood just outside Boston. The kind of home with a wraparound porch where you could imagine children playing. I had worked my way up to become a marketing executive at Meridian Strategies, one of the most prestigious firms in the Northeast. Jason was a financial advisor at a well-respected investment firm. We drove nice cars, took exotic vacations twice a year, and had a social circle filled with equally successful couples. We met in college during our senior year and dated for 3 years before getting married. Jason was charming, ambitious, and seemed to adore me. He would surprise me with weekend getaways, remember small details about things I liked, and always made me feel special. When we talked about our future, we both agreed we wanted children, but we also agreed to wait until we were both established in our careers and ready for that next step. By the time I turned 33, I started feeling ready. My biological clock wasn't exactly blaring alarms, but there was definitely a gentle ticking that grew a little louder each month. I brought it up with Jason several times over the past year, but he always had reasons to wait a little longer. Just until he got his promotion. Just until we renovated the guest room into a proper nursery. Just until his company's restructuring settled down. Looking back, there were signs that something was off. Jason started working later hours about 14 months ago. His business trips became more frequent, sometimes extended at the last minute. Our intimacy had decreased, which he attributed to stress and exhaustion. I rationalized it all away. We were busy professionals. Every marriage has phases. We were still solid. Then 3 months ago, Jason surprised me by suggesting we throw a big anniversary party. It seemed out of character for him since he usually preferred intimate celebrations, just the two of us. But I was thrilled, taking it as a sign that he wanted to reconnect and celebrate our relationship publicly. I thought maybe after the party, we would finally start trying for a baby. I threw myself into planning. We decided to host it at Aldrich Manor, a stunning venue with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. I spent weeks creating the perfect guest list, our closest friends, colleagues we both respected, and family members who could make the trip. I carefully selected a catering menu that included all our favorite foods, hired a jazz quartet that played songs from our wedding playlist, and even arranged for a photo display chronicling our relationship from college sweethearts to successful professionals. For the event, I bought a stunning midnight blue dress that made me feel confident and beautiful. Jason had always loved me in blue. I thought he would look at me the way he used to when we first met. The night before the party, we stayed up late finalizing details, and for the first time in months, I felt that old connection between us. He seemed excited, attentive, and kept saying how special the next day would be. If only I had known what he was actually planning. The morning of the party, Jason seemed unusually nervous. He checked his phone constantly and disappeared for a 20-minute call that he claimed was work-related. I was too busy with last-minute details to dwell on it. My best friend Rachel came over early to help me get ready, and she later told me that she thought Jason was acting strange, too fidgety, and overly enthusiastic. But in the moment, we both attributed it to anniversary excitement. As I applied my makeup and styled my hair, I had no idea that in just a few hours, the foundation of what I thought was my perfect life would completely crumble beneath my feet. I was still living in the illusion, completely unaware that Jason had been meticulously constructing an elaborate lie that would explode publicly in the worst way possible. The Aldrich Manor looked breathtaking that evening. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables adorned with white roses and blue hydrangeas. The jazz quartet played softly in the corner as guests began to arrive around 7. I greeted everyone with genuine joy, accepting gifts and congratulations on 8 years of marriage. An hour into the party, I saw my parents walk through the door and gasped in surprise. They lived in Arizona and had told me they couldn't make it due to my dad's doctor appointments. Jason had apparently arranged for their flights as a surprise, covering all their expenses. My mother embraced me tightly, whispering how proud she was of the life I'd built. My father, never an emotional man, had tears in his eyes as he hugged me. That moment now feels like a cruel setup for what was to come. By 8:30, the room was filled with 60 of our closest friends and family. My college roommate Allison had flown in from Seattle. Jason's brother Michael and his wife were there with their twins. My boss and several colleagues from Meridian mingled with Jason's coworkers. Everyone who mattered in our lives was present. At 9 o'clock, Jason clinked his glass with a knife, calling for everyone's attention. The room quieted as he put his arm around my waist, pulling me close. I smiled up at him, expecting a sweet anniversary toast. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate 8 amazing years with my incredible wife," Jason began, his voice thick with emotion that I now know was entirely fabricated. "Madison has been my rock, my inspiration, and soon." He paused dramatically, looking down at me with what appeared to be adoration. "She's going to be the mother of our child." The room erupted in gasps and applause. My mind went completely blank. Pregnant? I wasn't pregnant. We hadn't even been trying. I hadn't missed a period. There were no pregnancy tests, no doctor visits, absolutely nothing that could have led him to believe I was expecting. My mother burst into tears. My father was clapping loudly. Jason's parents rushed forward to embrace us both. And there I stood, a frozen smile plastered on my face, trying to comprehend what was happening. Jason squeezed my shoulder in what guests probably saw as affection, but I felt as a warning. "We've been keeping it a secret," he continued, "waiting until tonight to share our joy with all of you. Madison is 12 weeks along. We're due in January." He had even calculated a due date. The level of premeditation was staggering. People swarmed around us. My mother kept touching my still flat stomach, asking about symptoms and doctor appointments. Jason's mother talked about knitting baby blankets. Colleagues offered advice about maternity leave. My childhood friend Sophie, who had struggled with infertility, hugged me with tears in her eyes, genuinely happy for what she thought was my good fortune. Throughout it all, I maintained the charade. What choice did I have? Calling Jason a liar in front of everyone would have created a scene more humiliating than the lie itself. So I nodded, smiled, and gave vague answers. "Yes, we're so excited. No morning sickness, fortunately. We're still processing it ourselves." Only Rachel seemed to sense something was wrong. She caught my eye across the room, her brow furrowed in confusion. She knew we had been out for drinks just 2 weeks earlier, where I definitely consumed alcohol. When she managed to pull me aside to the ladies' room, she whispered, "Madison, what's going on? Are you really pregnant?" "I can't talk about it now," I replied, my voice trembling. "Please, just help me get through tonight." Like the true friend she is, Rachel stayed by my side for the rest of the evening, deflecting pregnancy questions when she could and squeezing my hand supportively when she couldn't. For 4 excruciating hours, I pretended. My face ached from fake smiling. My head throbbed with confusion and betrayal. My heart felt like it was being shredded with each congratulatory hug. Meanwhile, Jason played the role of excited father-to-be perfectly. He discussed nursery colors with my mother, joked about midnight cravings with his friends, and kept touching my stomach in a way that made me want to scream. By the time the last guest left around 1 in the morning, I was physically and emotionally exhausted. The venue staff cleaned up around us as Jason thanked them generously, still maintaining his jubilant facade. In the car ride home, he finally addressed what he'd done. "I know that was unexpected," he said casually, as if he'd merely surprised me with concert tickets rather than a fictitious pregnancy. "But I thought it would make the anniversary memorable." I couldn't even look at him. Why would you tell everyone I'm pregnant when I'm not? My voice was barely audible. I just thought it would be nice to have something special to announce. We've been talking about starting a family anyway. His explanation was so flimsy, so obviously false, that it only confirmed my suspicion that something much worse was behind the charade. When we arrived home, I felt like I was walking into a stranger's house. Everything looked the same: our wedding photos on the wall, the expensive furniture we'd selected together, the book I'd been reading still on the coffee table, but nothing felt familiar anymore. The life I thought I had was suddenly revealed to be an elaborate illusion, and I had no idea what was real anymore. After we got home from the party, the tension between us was unbearable. Jason acted as if nothing unusual had happened, pouring himself a whiskey and loosening his tie while I stood in our kitchen, still in my party dress, trying to process the evening's events. "We should talk about this," I finally said. "About what?" he replied with practiced innocence. "The party was a hit. Everyone had a great time." "About you announcing I'm pregnant when I'm not," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. His phone buzzed loudly on the counter. He glanced at it, his face changing subtly before he turned it face down. "It's just work," he said too quickly. "At 1:30 in the morning?" "The Singapore office," he explained smoothly. "Time difference." The phone buzzed again, then a third time in rapid succession. Jason's jaw tightened. "I need a shower," he announced abruptly, heading upstairs. I heard the bathroom door close and the shower start running. His phone, still on the kitchen counter, buzzed again. Something in me snapped. After 8 years of trusting this man completely, after the public humiliation I'd just endured, I felt entitled to answers. I picked up his phone. The screen showed several text notifications from Stephanie W. The most recent one read, "Call me now. We need to talk about what happened tonight." My hands shaking, I unlocked his phone. Jason had never changed his passcode for my birthday, apparently confident I would never violate his privacy. I opened his messages and started reading the conversation with Stephanie. My world collapsed around me as I scrolled through months of exchanges. Stephanie Walker wasn't just a colleague, as Jason had once mentioned casually. She was his mistress of 14 months. And she was pregnant. With Jason's child. The messages painted a clear picture of their relationship and the plan they had concocted. Stephanie was 11 weeks pregnant. She wanted to keep the baby. Jason was panicking about how to handle the situation without destroying our marriage or his reputation. Their solution: announce that I was pregnant first, then a few months later, after everyone had adjusted to the idea of us having a child, Jason would suggest adoption due to fictitious complications with my pregnancy. Then they would conveniently adopt Stephanie's baby, and no one would ever know about the affair. I felt physically ill as I read their callous discussions about me. Stephanie, what if she wants her own baby instead of adopting? Jason, trust me, Madison will do whatever I want. She always does. Stephanie, won't people notice the timing is off? Jason, we'll say the baby came early. People are clueless about these things. And the most devastating exchange, sent just before our anniversary party. Jason, I'm announcing it tonight. Everyone who matters will be there. Stephanie, are you sure this will work? Jason, positive. Once it's public, she won't be able to back out without looking like the bad guy. Stephanie, call me once it's done. They had orchestrated my humiliation as part of their scheme to cover up their affair and pass off their child as ours. The level of deception was breathtaking. I continued reading, discovering that Jason had been visiting Stephanie on his so-called business trips. He had taken her to restaurants where he and I had celebrated anniversaries. He had spent Christmas Eve with her last year while telling me he was stuck at the airport due to a snowstorm. The shower upstairs was still running when I found photos they had exchanged. Intimate photos. Photos of them together in hotel rooms. A picture of a sonogram with the caption, "Our little miracle." I felt like I was going to be sick. Then I found evidence of their future plans. They had been looking at houses together in Connecticut. Stephanie had sent links to properties with notes like, "Perfect backyard for the baby," and "Master bedroom big enough for us." They were planning a life together, with me somehow still in the picture as the supposed adoptive mother of their child. I heard the shower turn off upstairs. Quickly, I forwarded the most damning messages and photos to my own phone, then deleted the forwarded messages from his sent folder. I placed his phone exactly where he had left it and moved to the living room, my mind racing with what I had discovered. When Jason came downstairs in his pajamas, hair still damp from the shower, he found me sitting in the dark. "You should get some sleep," he said casually. "It's been a big night." I looked at him, this stranger I had shared a bed with for 8 years, and realized I didn't recognize him at all. Who was this person capable of such calculated deception? This man who could announce a fake pregnancy, who could plan to use me as a cover for his affair, who could lie so effortlessly to everyone we knew. "You're right," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "It has been a big night. I'm exhausted." I went upstairs to our bedroom and locked the door, something I had never done before in our marriage. I curled up on my side of the bed, still in my party dress, and finally allowed the tears to come. I cried silently into my pillow, mourning the life I thought I had and the husband I thought I knew. But as the initial shock and pain began to subside, something else took its place: determination. I would not be a pawn in their game. I would not be humiliated and manipulated. I needed time to think, to plan, to decide how to respond to this betrayal. One thing was certain: Jason and Stephanie had severely underestimated me. And they would regret that miscalculation. The morning after discovering Jason's betrayal, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. I couldn't face colleagues who had been at the party, couldn't manage their excited questions about my non-existent pregnancy. Jason had already left for work when I woke up, leaving a note about having an early meeting. No mention of the anniversary party, the pregnancy announcement, or the massive lie he was perpetuating. As soon as he was gone, I called Rachel. She arrived at my house 30 minutes later with coffee and a determined expression. When I showed her the messages I had forwarded to my phone, her face transformed from concern to cold fury. "That manipulative, cheating bastard," she said, scrolling through the evidence. "Madison, this is beyond an affair. This is calculated psychological abuse." Rachel wasn't just my best friend, she was also an attorney specializing in family law. Her professional assessment of my situation was blunt. "You need to protect yourself immediately. Financially, legally, and emotionally." She helped me develop a strategic plan. First, I needed proper legal representation. While Rachel offered to represent me, she suggested I hire someone with no personal connection to either of us. She recommended Patricia Winters, a cutthroat divorce attorney known for her thoroughness and discretion. I met with Patricia the next day in her downtown office. After reviewing the evidence of Jason's infidelity and deception, she outlined what we needed to do. First, we document everything: the text messages, the fake pregnancy announcement, the financial records. Second, we investigate your joint finances thoroughly. Men who cheat often hide money. Third, we prepare for him to play dirty. Based on what you've shown me, your husband is not above elaborate deception to get what he wants. Following Patricia's advice, I began methodically building my case. I forwarded all the evidence to a new email account Jason knew nothing about. I photographed valuable items in our home. I made copies of important documents: our marriage certificate, property deeds, insurance policies, tax returns. While Jason was at work, I carefully searched our home office. In the back of his filing cabinet, I found bank statements for accounts I didn't know existed. He had been siphoning money from our joint accounts in small amounts for over a year, accumulating nearly $70,000 in a separate account under his name only. I discovered credit card statements showing purchases at high-end jewelry stores and luxury hotels that weren't for me. A receipt for a $3,000 bracelet dated just 2 weeks ago. Charges from a weekend at the Four Seasons when he had told me he was at a financial conference in Chicago. The most shocking discovery came when I found documents for a property purchase in Westport, Connecticut. Jason had bought a house. A 4-bedroom colonial with a water view, without my knowledge, using money from his secret account for the down payment. The property was titled solely in his name, despite our agreement that all major assets would be jointly owned. I took everything to Patricia, who added it to our growing file. He's been planning his exit strategy, she explained. The separate accounts, the secret property, these are classic signs. The fake pregnancy announcement was likely his way of maintaining access to your joint assets while he finalized his plans with Stephanie. Under Patricia's guidance, I began protecting my own finances. I opened individual accounts at a different bank. I transferred my personal inheritance, money my grandmother had left specifically to me, out of our joint investment account. I updated the beneficiaries on my life insurance and retirement accounts, changing them from Jason to my parents. Throughout this process, I maintained my normal routine as much as possible. I returned to work after my sick days, explaining to concerned colleagues that I wasn't ready to discuss the pregnancy yet. I cooked dinner, watched TV with Jason in the evenings, and pretended everything was normal, all while systematically preparing to dismantle the life we had built together. The hardest part was continuing to play along with the pregnancy lie. Friends sent congratulatory flowers. My mother called daily with questions about the baby and suggestions for names. Jason's mother mailed us a box of hand-knitted baby items that made me physically ill to look at. Jason grew increasingly nervous as days passed. I could see him watching me carefully, waiting for me to break or confront him. I did neither. Instead, I became the perfect expectant wife. I downloaded pregnancy apps on my phone where he could see them. I left prenatal vitamin bottles visible in our bathroom. I even started a Pinterest board for nursery ideas that I knew he checked when I wasn't around. My performance had two purposes: to buy time while I prepared my exit strategy and to lull Jason into a false sense of security. It worked. After a week of my convincing performance, he visibly relaxed, apparently believing I had accepted the situation or was too afraid of public embarrassment to challenge his lie. What Jason failed to understand was that I was no longer the accommodating, conflict-avoidant wife he thought he knew. With each piece of evidence I gathered, with each lie I uncovered, my resolve strengthened. The hurt and shock were still there, but they were now fuel for something else, a determination to take back control of my life and to ensure Jason faced consequences for his actions. 2 weeks after the anniversary party, I had everything in place. My finances were secured. My legal strategy was developed. I had signed a lease on a new apartment under my maiden name, gradually moving essential items there when Jason wasn't home. I had spoken privately with my parents, preparing them for the truth without revealing it fully yet. The final piece came when Rachel introduced me to Bennett Cooper, a private investigator who specialized in infidelity cases. Bennett confirmed what the text messages had suggested. Jason and Stephanie were not just having an affair, they were actively planning a life together. He provided photographs of them house hunting, shopping for baby items, and meeting with what appeared to be a lawyer of their own. Armed with comprehensive evidence and a solid plan, I was ready for the next phase, the confrontation. But this wouldn't be a private argument behind closed doors. Just as Jason had humiliated me publicly, my response would also have an audience. I began planning a dinner gathering that would give Jason a taste of his own medicine, a night he would never forget. Exactly 3 weeks after Jason's fake pregnancy announcement, I sent out invitations for what I called a pregnancy celebration dinner at Lorenzo's, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown. I invited the same core group who had attended our anniversary party, our closest friends, immediate family, and a few key colleagues. Jason seemed pleased by my initiative, interpreting it as acceptance of our situation. "This is perfect," he said, reviewing the guest list. "Everyone will be so happy to celebrate with us." "That's what I thought," I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. After all, everyone who matters should be there. In the days leading up to the dinner, I finalized all my preparations. I confirmed with Rachel that she would bring her laptop and portable projector for my special presentation that Jason assumed would be ultrasound photos or a gender reveal. I spoke privately with my parents, telling them I had important news to share at the dinner, but asking them to trust me until then. I moved the last of my essential belongings to my new apartment. I transferred my portion of our joint accounts to my private accounts. I delivered key documents to Patricia's office for safekeeping. Everything was in place for what would happen after the dinner. The night before the event, I barely slept. Not from anxiety, but from a strange sense of calm determination. The woman who had cried into her pillow 3 weeks ago was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone unwilling to be made a fool of any longer. The evening of the dinner arrived. I dressed carefully in a crimson-sheath dress, a deliberate contrast to the soft blue I had worn at the anniversary party. When Jason saw me, he frowned slightly. "Are you sure about that dress? It's not very maternal." "I'm only 12 weeks along according to your announcement," I replied coolly. "No need for maternity clothes yet." At Lorenzo's, we arrived to find most of our guests already seated in the private dining room I had reserved. My mother embraced me warmly, whispering how excited she was. Jason's brother clapped him on the back. Rachel caught my eye from across the room and gave me a subtle nod. After everyone was seated and had ordered, Jason stood up as if to make a toast. I placed my hand on his arm, stopping him. "Actually, honey, I've prepared something special tonight," I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet table. "Rachel, could you help me with the presentation?" Rachel set up her laptop and projector while conversation at the table buzzed with speculation about what we were about to share. Jason looked confused, but not yet concerned. He still believed he was in control of the narrative. I moved to the head of the table, standing in front of the blank wall where the projection would appear. I looked around at the faces of people I cared about, people who had been lied to just as I had been. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I began. 3 weeks ago, at our anniversary party, Jason shared some exciting news with you. Tonight, I want to share the full story. I nodded to Rachel, who started the presentation. The first slide showed a simple title, "The Truth About My Pregnancy." Jason's face drained of color. He started to stand, but Rachel's husband David, who we had briefed in advance, placed a firm hand on his shoulder, keeping him seated. "I am not pregnant," I announced clearly. I never was. The announcement at our anniversary party was the first I had heard of it, just like all of you. Gasps and confused murmurs filled the room. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Jason's father leaned forward, brow furrowed in confusion. "However, someone is pregnant," I continued, nodding to Rachel to advance to the next slide, which showed the screenshot of the sonogram I had found on Jason's phone. Stephanie Walker, Jason's mistress of 14 months, is expecting his child in January. The room erupted in shocked exclamations. Jason jumped to his feet, his face contorted with anger and panic. "Madison, stop this right now," he hissed. "No, Jason. I will not stop. I will not be silent. I will not be your cover story." My voice remained steady as I turned back to our guests. "For the past 3 weeks, I've been gathering evidence of Jason's deception." The next slide showed a carefully edited selection of text messages between Jason and Stephanie, planning the fake pregnancy announcement, discussing their future together, and strategizing how to use me as part of their cover. I had removed anything too intimate or graphic, focusing only on the deception. "As you can see," I explained, "the plan was to announce my fake pregnancy, then claim complications that would lead us to adopt Stephanie's baby when it was born. Also, Jason could have his mistress, their child, and our marriage intact for appearances." I advanced through slides showing the financial evidence, the secret bank accounts, the property purchase in Connecticut, the luxury purchases for Stephanie. Throughout my presentation, the reactions around the table evolved from shock to outrage. My father stood up at one point, his face flushed with anger, but my mother pulled him back down, whispering for him to let me finish. Jason's mother was openly weeping. His brother stared at him with disgust. Jason made several attempts to interrupt, to explain, to minimize what I was revealing. But each time, I calmly continued, backed by the irrefutable evidence projected on the wall behind me. "I've spent 3 weeks pretending," I said, nearing the end of my presentation. "Accepting congratulations for a pregnancy that doesn't exist. Watching Jason continue his affair while playing the excited father-to-be at home. Discovering more lies every day. But that ends tonight." The final slide showed a simple photograph of divorce papers. "Jason," I said, turning to face him directly for the first time, "these are divorce papers prepared by my attorney." They detail your adultery, financial deception, and emotional abuse. You'll find them waiting at home, along with a restraining order preventing you from accessing our joint assets pending court proceedings. I turned back to our stunned audience. I want to apologize to all of you for this painful evening. You deserve to know the truth. Thank you for supporting me through what you thought was a happy time. I hope you'll continue to support me now. With that, I gathered my purse and jacket. The dinner has been paid for. Please stay and process this however you need to. I won't be joining you, as I've already moved out of our home and have a new place to begin my life without deception. I walked over to my parents, hugging them tightly and whispering that I would call them tomorrow to explain everything more fully. Then I nodded to Rachel, who would ensure Jason didn't follow me, and walked out of the restaurant with my head held high. Outside, a car was waiting as I had arranged. As we pulled away, I saw Jason burst out of the restaurant, looking around frantically, but it was too late. I was already gone from the restaurant, from our home, and from his life. That night, in my new apartment with its sparse furnishings and empty walls, I felt something unexpected: freedom. The weight of Jason's betrayal was still there, but now it was accompanied by the lightness of having reclaimed my narrative, my dignity, and my future. The days following my public revelation were a whirlwind of reactions. My phone buzzed constantly with messages of support, shock, and questions from those who had been at the dinner or heard about it afterward. Rachel acted as my buffer, fielding calls and coordinating with Patricia about legal matters so I could focus on rebuilding my life. Jason's response was exactly what Patricia had predicted: first desperate, then angry, then manipulative. Within 24 hours of the dinner, he had called me 37 times and left increasingly frantic voicemails. "Madison, please, we need to talk about this. You're overreacting. We can work this out. What you did was completely inappropriate. Think about my reputation. If you just come home, I'll explain everything." When I didn't respond to any of his attempts at contact, his tone shifted dramatically. The final voicemail was cold and threatening. "You've made a huge mistake. I've built everything we have. You'll have nothing without me." I forwarded each message to Patricia, who added them to our growing file of evidence about Jason's character and behavior. The fallout extended far beyond our personal relationship. Jason's parents, Margaret and Richard, who had always treated me like a daughter, were devastated by their son's actions. Margaret called me 2 days after the dinner, sobbing. "We raised him better than this," she said. "Richard can barely look at the photos of us at your wedding now. We want you to know we stand with you, dear. Whatever you need." Their support was unexpected and deeply touching. It also seemed to infuriate Jason, who couldn't understand why his parents weren't defending him unconditionally. At work, the situation became common knowledge despite my attempts at discretion. My boss, Diane, called me into her office my first day back. "Madison," she said kindly, "everyone here respects your privacy, but we also want you to know you have our support. If you need flexible hours during this time, just let me know." I learned later that Jason wasn't receiving the same understanding at his firm. His colleagues, many of whom had attended our anniversary party and some the reveal dinner, were openly disgusted by his behavior. Financial advising is built on trust and integrity, and Jason's elaborate deception had called both into question. Clients began requesting different advisors. His standing in the firm plummeted. The most dramatic fallout, however, involved Stephanie. According to Rachel's husband David, who worked at a law firm connected to Jason's company, Stephanie had been blindsided by my public exposure of their affair. She had apparently believed Jason's promises that I would quietly accept the situation once it was too publicly embarrassing to contest. When the truth came out instead, Stephanie panicked. She was a junior financial analyst with career ambitions, now suddenly exposed as having an affair with a married colleague and pregnant with his child. The professional ramifications were immediate. She requested a transfer to the company's Seattle office, which was granted more as a way to remove her from the situation than to accommodate her. But before leaving Boston, Stephanie made one last desperate attempt to salvage something from the wreckage. She showed up at my office building, waiting for me in the lobby after work. "Madison," she called out as I walked toward the exit. "Please, just 5 minutes." I should have kept walking. I knew that logically. But some part of me wanted to hear what this woman, who had been willing to use me as a cover for her affair, had to say. 3 minutes, I replied, leading her to a small seating area away from the main foot traffic. I never meant for any of this to happen, she began, her hands nervously cradling her slightly rounded belly. Jason told me your marriage was essentially over, that you were staying together for appearances, but had an understanding. And you believed that classic line? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. I wanted to believe it, she admitted. But then when he suggested announcing your pregnancy, I knew it wasn't true. I should have ended things then. Yes, you should have. I'm moving to Seattle next week, she continued. I wanted you to know that Jason and I are over. After your dinner, he tried to convince me we could still make it work, but I've realized what kind of man he truly is. I felt a strange mixture of vindication and pity. What about the baby? I asked, nodding toward her stomach. I'm keeping my child, she said firmly. But Jason will only be involved financially. I don't want my baby raised by someone capable of such deception. After she left, I sat there for several minutes, processing the encounter. Stephanie had been wrong to participate in Jason's deception, but she was also one of his victims in a way. He had manipulated us both, just differently. As weeks passed, my new life began taking shape. My apartment slowly filled with new furniture, pieces I chose solely based on my own taste for the first time. I threw myself into work, earning praise for a major campaign I developed. I started therapy to process the betrayal and examine why I had been so blind to Jason's true nature for so long. Friends rallied around me. Rachel and I had dinner weekly. Allison visited from Seattle, staying with me for a long weekend of healing conversations and even some laughter. My parents came for Thanksgiving, helping me establish new traditions in my new space. Meanwhile, Jason's life continued to unravel. He was placed on probation at work. Friends who had initially tried to remain neutral gradually distanced themselves as more details of his deception emerged. The beautiful house in Connecticut that he had purchased for his future with Stephanie sat empty, becoming another financial burden as our divorce proceedings tied up his assets. Through it all, I maintained my dignity. I never engaged in public mudslinging or revenge beyond my initial exposure of the truth. I let the divorce proceedings move forward methodically, following Patricia's expert guidance. Then, almost exactly 2 months after the dinner at Lorenzo's, a certified letter arrived at my apartment. It was from Martin Goldman, an attorney representing Jason. I scanned the legal language with increasing disbelief before calling Patricia. He's suing me for emotional distress? I couldn't keep the incredulous laugh from escaping. After what he did? It's a desperate move, Patricia assured me. His financial deceptions are well documented. The separate property, the hidden accounts, they all violate the terms of our state's marital property laws. He's looking at significant financial penalties in the divorce settlement. This lawsuit is his attempt to create a counterbalance. Will it work? I asked. Not a chance, Patricia replied confidently. In fact, this gives us an opening for a robust countersuit. His actions, the public lie about your pregnancy, the planned manipulation regarding the adoption of his mistress's child, constitute severe emotional abuse. We now have documented evidence that his actions were premeditated and designed to manipulate you psychologically. As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange sense of calm. Jason's lawsuit wasn't a threat, it was a gift. In his desperation, he had given me exactly what I needed to ensure he faced the full consequences of his actions. He had no idea what I had prepared for him, and his own arrogance had just made my case even stronger. Patricia wasted no time filing our countersuit to Jason's emotional distress claim. Her legal team compiled a comprehensive case documenting the psychological impact of Jason's deception, the public humiliation, the planned long-term manipulation, the gaslighting when I questioned him, and the financial deceptions that left me vulnerable. We included testimony from Dr. Eleanor Pierce, the therapist I had been seeing, who provided professional assessment of the psychological trauma caused by Jason's actions. Rachel contributed a sworn statement about my mental state immediately after discovering the truth. Even Jason's mother, Margaret, in perhaps the most damning evidence against her own son, provided a written statement confirming his pattern of manipulative behavior dating back to childhood. In preparation for our court appearance, Patricia coached me on maintaining composure when facing Jason. "He'll try to provoke an emotional reaction," she warned. "That's his only play now. To make you look unstable or vindictive." As our court date approached, Jason made a desperate attempt to settle. He offered to drop his emotional distress claim if I would agree to a 50-50 split of our marital assets, despite the evidence of his financial misconduct. Patricia delivered my response, "Not a chance." The morning of our court appearance arrived on a crisp March day, 5 months after Jason's fake pregnancy announcement. I wore a simple navy suit that Rachel had helped me select, professional, confident, but not intimidating. The goal was to appear exactly what I was, a reasonable woman who had been subjected to extraordinary deception. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined from television dramas, the wood paneling darker, the atmosphere more solemn. Jason sat at the opposite table with Martin Goldman, looking thinner than when I'd last seen him, the confident gleam in his eye replaced by nervous darting glances. Judge Marilyn Hoffman, a stern-faced woman in her 60s with a reputation for no-nonsense efficiency, called the court to order. Jason's claim was presented first. Martin Goldman attempted to paint me as a vengeful wife who had deliberately set out to destroy Jason's reputation and career through a public spectacle. "Your Honor," Goldman argued, "Mrs. Lawrence could have addressed her concerns privately. Instead, she orchestrated a public humiliation designed specifically to damage my client professionally and personally." Patricia's cross-examination of Jason was methodical and devastating. "Mr. Lawrence, before Mrs. Lawrence's dinner revelation, had you informed her you were having an affair?" "No, but—" "Yes or no answers, please." "Had you informed her about your mistress's pregnancy?" "No." "Had you consulted her before announcing to 60 guests that she was pregnant when she was not?" "I thought she would be happy about." "Yes or no, Mr. Lawrence?" "No." With each question, Jason's case unraveled further. Patricia presented the text messages showing the calculated nature of his deception. She submitted financial records documenting his hidden accounts and secret property purchase. She played selected voicemails demonstrating his attempts to manipulate me after I discovered the truth. When it was my turn to testify, I spoke clearly and honestly about discovering Jason's betrayal, about the humiliation of pretending to be pregnant while processing his infidelity, about the shock of learning he had planned to use me as cover for his mistress's child. "Mrs. Lawrence," Judge Hoffman asked toward the end of my testimony, "why did you choose to reveal the truth in a public setting rather than privately?" I took a deep breath before answering. "Your Honor, Jason took away my agency when he announced a fake pregnancy without my knowledge or consent. He used our friends and family as unwitting participants in his deception. I believed they deserved to know the truth in the same way they had been told the lie." Judge Hoffman nodded thoughtfully. After hearing all testimony, she recessed to consider her ruling, returning an hour later with her decision. In the matter of Lawrence versus Lawrence, she began, "I find the plaintiff's claim of emotional distress not only without merit, but frankly audacious given the circumstances." She peered sternly at Jason over her glasses. "Mr. Lawrence, this court finds that you engaged in a pattern of deceptive and manipulative behavior that constitutes marital misconduct of the highest order." She continued, "Regarding the counterclaim, this court finds in favor of Mrs. Lawrence. Mr. Lawrence's actions were calculated to cause emotional distress and to manipulate Mrs. Lawrence into a position where she would feel compelled to participate in a scheme that violated basic principles of marital trust." The financial terms of Judge Hoffman's ruling exceeded even Patricia's expectations. In addition to an equal division of our legitimate marital assets, I was awarded the Connecticut property Jason had purchased secretly, compensation for the money he had diverted to hidden accounts, and substantial damages for emotional distress. Jason sat frozen as the ruling was read, the color draining from his face as he realized the extent of his defeat. When Judge Hoffman concluded, he turned to Martin Goldman in disbelief, but his attorney simply shook his head. There were no grounds for appeal. Outside the courthouse, Patricia squeezed my arm. "Congratulations, Madison. It's rare to see such a complete victory." "Thank you for everything," I replied, feeling a complex mixture of vindication, relief, and lingering sadness for what might have been. Rachel was waiting by my car. "How did it go?" she asked anxiously. "It's over," I said simply. "And I won." The months following the court decision were a time of healing and rebuilding. I sold the Connecticut property and used the proceeds to buy a small but charming condo in a neighborhood I had always loved. I accepted a promotion at Meridian that involved more creative control and a significant salary increase. I continued therapy, working through the trust issues that Jason's betrayal had created. Through mutual friends, I heard that Jason had finally accepted responsibility for his actions, at least partially. He had moved to Chicago for a fresh start after his firm asked him to resign. Stephanie had given birth to a healthy baby boy in January and was building a new life in Seattle, with Jason providing financial support but having minimal involvement otherwise. As the one-year anniversary of Jason's fake pregnancy announcement approached, I found myself reflecting on all that had changed. The pain had diminished, replaced by wisdom and a newfound appreciation for my own resilience. I had discovered strengths I never knew I possessed: the courage to stand up for myself, the clarity to see through manipulation, the fortitude to rebuild my life on my own terms. On the actual anniversary, I invited my closest supporters, Rachel, my parents, a few friends who had stood by me throughout the ordeal, to my condo for dinner. As we sat around my table, enjoying good food and genuine laughter, I realized I had created something precious from the wreckage of betrayal, an authentic life surrounded by people who truly cared for me. "I want to propose a toast," I said, raising my glass. "Not to the past, but to the future. And to the unexpected gift Jason gave me without intending to, the chance to discover who I really am and what I'm capable of." Rachel smiled knowingly. "To Madison," she said, "who taught us all that the best revenge isn't about destroying someone else, it's about rebuilding yourself stronger than before." As our glasses clinked together, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent for so long. The lesson I learned through all of this wasn't about revenge, although Jason certainly faced consequences for his actions. It was about self-worth, about refusing to be defined by someone else's betrayal, about the power of truth even when it's painful. Sometimes life's most important lessons come packaged in experiences we would never choose. Jason's betrayal had shattered the life I thought I wanted, but from those pieces, I had constructed something more authentic, more meaningful, and entirely my own. Have you ever faced a betrayal that ultimately made you stronger? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and growth. And if you know someone who might need to hear that there's life after betrayal, share this video with them. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes our greatest strength emerges from our deepest wounds.